Good morning, everyone. We studied today the portion of Bamidbar, and we're studying the first talk of the Rebbe in selections from Likutei Sichos in English. Just an introduction. The Rebbe, the Torah begins this week's Torah portion with a new book, Bamidbar, and it is also that this Shabbat is the Shabbat before the holiday of Shavuot. Most years, Bamidbar is before Shavuot. This year, Shavuot is Sunday night. Says the Rebbe, in most years, we read Parshat Bamidbar on the Shabbat before the holiday of Shavuot, the time of the giving of the Torah. Every Torah reading shows a connection with the period of the year during which it is read. This is particularly true regarding the relationship between Parshat Bamidbar and the giving of the Torah. Every time you celebrate Shabbat and the next week you're going to have a special day, there is a connection between the portion of the week and the event that takes place. It is particularly true regarding the giving of the Torah, the holiday of Shavuot, which will happen just this day after Shabbat. The giving of the Torah is described as the wedding between God and the Jewish people. The giving of the Torah was a wedding. The Mount Sinai was the chuppah. The two Shushbinim, the two representatives of the bride and groom, are Moshe and Aaron. Moshe was the God representative, Aaron was the Jewish people, the bride's representative. So it's a marriage, says the Rebbe. And the custom is that on the Shabbat before the wedding, the groom is called to the Torah as preparation for the wedding. Every time a couple gets married in Jewish tradition, the Shabbat before, the groom is called to the Torah. Why? Because we want to be blessed for the wedding. We want to make sure the Torah is part of the relationship when we put it together. Much more so in regards to the wedding between the Jewish people and God. They're getting married, so they have to be called to the Torah before Shabbat, before the holiday on Shabbat. Therefore, this Shabbat is in particularly connected to the holiday of Shavuot. Says the Rebbe, from this it is understood that God's command to count the Jewish people right at the beginning of the Torah, it says, in the second year, the second month, which is Iyar, the month we just passed, God commanded Moshe and Aaron to count the Jewish people, and we read their counts, their families. Take a census of the entire congregation of the children of Israel that begins the Torah reading, shares a connection, and serves as a preparation for God's wedding with the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah. If that's the start and a big part of the Torah portion, it must share a special connection to the giving of the Torah. Says the Rebbe, we will understand the connection to giving of the Torah and the census that God is asking Moshe and Aaron to take by first clarifying few questions. And the Rebbe is asking three questions. The first question the Rebbe is asking, sorry, I was trying to find it. Says the Rebbe, the reason, okay, so Rashi, the Rebbe is going to ask three questions, but first the Rebbe is going to bring Rashi's explanation. The above can be clarified by first explaining Rashi's comment regarding the census at the beginning of the Torah reading. Rashi says the following: why God needs to take a census of the Jewish people? Since he cherishes them, he counts them at all times. On the 1st of Nisan, the sanctuary was erected, and on the 1st of Iyar, he had them counted again. So Rashi says, you know why God asked to take a census of Jewish people? Because he loves them so much. If you have a treasure, you like to count it. Counting it brings you pleasure. And that's what God does. He wants to testify to the entire universe that he cherishes the Jewish people, therefore he counts them all the time. All the time. And Rashi says he counted them in the 1st of Nisan, just before the Mishkan, the tabernacle was erected, and he counted them again the 1st of Iyar in this week's Torah portion after the Mishkan was dedicated and they're already serving in the Mishkan.
How big a difference would there be?
With not much. No big difference. So that's Rashi's point. Why God is asking for the census? To prove to the world how much he loves the Jewish people who wants to count them. The Rabbi asked 3 questions. The first question is, says the Rabbi, this pleasure of counting to know how much you have is for someone who don't really know what they have. So they want to see their stock. Did it go up? How much? They count. They want to see the numbers all the time. You like to look at your account. But God knows everything. So there's no need to count for God to know how much. This, in other words, what we say that someone who cherishes an object or a number of things, he counts them all the time, it's for human. It's mystery. And now he discovers how much he has, how many sheep he has in his herd, how much money he has in the stock market. But for God, he knows everything. There's no need to count. Question number 2. If you want to say that the account of the Jewish people came together with the building of the tabernacle, it could have come in the 1st of Nisan, not on the 1st of Iyar. Because they left Egypt, he counted them 1. As we will discover, there were 3 times God counted them. If they left Egypt, he counted them 1. Then he counted them after the golden calf. And in between, he count them here on the 1st of Iyar.
You didn't count them, they would cross the then to go to Jericho?
Later on, the last time, yes. But before that time, right now. So he counted them when they left Egypt. And then he wants to share his divine presence. He wants to rest himself. Among Jewish people, he counts them. Says the Rebbe, this would be appropriate to count them then in the 1st of Nisan, before the erection, the building of the temple, and not on the 1st of Iyar after the temple was. You understand that?
Yeah.
Number 3, why you and Aaron? In the previous time when they left Egypt, it doesn't say who counted them. The second time around, it's only Moshe. Here, God says you and Aaron count them. Why do you need Aaron to count them?
We needed an auditor.
Huh?
We needed an auditor. Somebody check on much.
We go to the accounting school, I think. What is after the eagle?
That's the 3rd time.
So this was before the third time.
So Rashi said he count them all the time. The first time when they left Mitzrayim, Egypt, and then the 1st of Nisan, the tabernacle was erected, and the 1st of Iyar, he has to count them. That's this week's Torah portion. Later on, God says, let's see how many are remained after the golden calf, and he count them a 3rd time.
So why,
Huh?
why Aaron?
And the 3rd one is why Aaron. Only time Aaron. Says the Rebbe, the idea of counting, here is the answer. The idea of counting is very, very special in one way, and that is, it's an equalizer. Whenever, before you count, let's say a bunch of people for a minyan, huh?
Dump the soda. Too close.
The idea, thank you. The idea of
Yeah, don't dump it on me, thank you.
the idea of a bunch of men is that usually you would have different type of people. Some people are more emotional, some people are more intelligent, some people are healthier, some people are taller, shorter, overweight, underweight, etc. But when you say everyone counts, and we need to know how many men or how many people are in the room, like a big ballroom that has a capacity 135 men, only then you are settled down to understanding that every single person is one, not more and not less. God's love for the Jewish people is a spark, a godly spark. And that godly spark remain in there no matter what age you are, no matter how healthy you are, no matter how tall you are. It's equally in my and yours the same. I may be the smartest, most intelligent person. You must be, or somebody might be on the last breath of their life. That godly spark is equally found in them. So therefore, for example, when you need a minion, 10 men, we need 10 sparks. You can bring someone who is crippled and the doctors give him only 60 minutes. As long as they are still breathing, their spark is there and they are counted. That's the idea of God's love to the Jewish people. He loves them not because of what they do for him. He loves them not because of their great intelligence or kindness and compassion. He loves them because they possess a godly spark. And that godly spark is found in every Jew, no matter what kind he's in jail, he's a big bum. It doesn't matter. They're all equally the same. Says the Rebbe, that's why Rashi says, he counts them to let the rest of the world know how much he loves them. It's not to let himself enjoy the pleasure. Remember the way we understand someone who loves something likes to count it continuously so he derives pleasure. No, it says lehodia chivatam, to tell the world how much he loves them.
How would they know?
Because they see that he counts them. In
Yeah.
other words,
How would the guy know this? Yeah.
by they reading the text. When they go to the text and they see God wants to count them all the time, it means that God wants to tell the rest of the world that their quality or their uniqueness is not about something you see. It's not something that's measurable, but something that's equally for every Jew the same as in every other Jew. And that's the idea of what says the Rebbe. That will explain another difficulty. It says that God counts them all the time, right? I'm surprised you didn't ask. What do you mean all the time? All he counted them is what?
3 times.
3 times.
At the moment, 3.
Says the Rebbe. He counted them the first and the second month, which is ER. And so only 3 times he counts them. The next time he will count them will take 38 years. 38 years. So in 1 year, he counted them 3 times. And then 38 years, he'll count them 4 times. How many more times God counted the Jewish people throughout history? 3,000 years. Rambam brings 5 more times. There will be a total 9 times throughout history. The 10th time would be Mashiach. Mashiach will count the 10th time. So how can you say he counts them all the time? Kol sha'ah, every hour, meaning all the time. It's a phrase that means all the time. There was no all time. There was only 3,500 years. Only 9 times.
But we don't know whether he's counting them all the time. We're not God. So God may be counting all the time.
So you can say God counts them all the time, but he did not record it in the text. That's one explanation. But Rashi says God wants to show the world how much he loves them. Therefore, he's counting them all the time. And Rashi explained that on the counting that appears in this week's Torah portion. But that's only a very few times that we know about. So one explanation that's given, and it's a simple explanation, and the Rebbe is not going to disprove that explanation, but that every time, all the time, meaning every time that they are uplifted for a specific occasion. Anytime that's something unique, the building of the tabernacle, after the golden calf, now they did teshuvah, they're about to enter the Holy Land. There is another time King David counted them because they were about to go to Jerusalem and build a temple. Every time before there is an upgrade or an elevation, he counts them. But says the Rebbe, to say all the time, meaning all the special time, anytime there is a special time, does not fit with the theme here, and it's a very far-fetched explanation. Says the Rebbe, what God wants to show us is that because he loves them, he counts them all the time. It is, the way I'm paraphrasing the Rebbe's explanation, it is to impact the Jewish persons all the time. All the time means without an interruption. The love between Jew and God is all the time, no interruption. And here is the way the Rebbe explains. We already been told that God, out of the love, is counting all the time, not like because you want to know how much you have, what you have. It is because he wants to infuse us with the quality of a godly spark that is on all of us, in all of us equally, right? That's accounting. Says the Rebbe, but Rashi says it's all the time. You know why? The reality is, if someone does a sin, what happens? They cut themselves off of God. They remove themselves from God. This can be only temporary because there is a time of teshuvah. What happened to teshuvah? A great level of teshuvah removes the past, fixes magically. Imagine a robe was cut. You can tie the robe, so you have a knot, which reflects that there was a cutout, or you can magically put the rope together, weld it, or do it in a way that you will never see that there was a cut. Says the Rebbe that the Torah gave us teshuvah in a way that we can remove the sin from altogether, that as if it never existed. Yet a Jew will never cease from his connection to God. As we know in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that even the most simplest Jew will never agree to worship idols because they don't want to be separated from God even for one moment, for a short while. In other words, God is counting them all the time, refers to the uniqueness of what found in every Jew equally is at all time and will never be ceased. So therefore a Jew who possesses godly spark will not allow for that spark to disappear, to be put off. Even though he can reignite it later, even temporarily, they won't do it. And that's what it means all the time. Did you understand that?
That's a stretch.
Ah,
It's a bit of a stretch.
why?
I don't know, it seems like a bit of a stretch. Do you think? Maybe you didn't understand it.
This is the implication of Rashi's wording that God counts the Jewish people at all times. His counting of the Jewish people, that is, his highlighting of their fundamental Jewish core, affects them and guards them at all times. There is not even a brief moment when it is not influencing a Jew's conduct. Accordingly, a Jew will never willingly separate himself from God for even the slightest amount of time. True, a person who sins can correct his action afterwards. However, until he corrects his actions, he is separate from God. Rather than remain separate for that brief moment, a Jew will be willing to cast away any calculations and sacrifice himself because his godly core has been aroused and rules over him. He is counted at all time. Counted at all time, the godly spark is always there all the times, no matter what the challenge is. Does that help you a little better?
A little.
A little bit. Okay. Says the Rebbe, based on that, we can explain that the relationship between the Jew and the godly spark and God can be expressed in three different levels. One level is that the faculties of the human, intelligence, emotions, are still earthly, animalistic. However, there is a godly spark that overshadows them. So we call it temporary and external. So when a Jew is challenged with great desire to sin, and he really wants it, he will refrain and he will serve God. Why will he do it? He can't explain. Intelligence and emotions are not part of that action. They are being forced, overpowered by the godly spark. That's the first level.
Okay.
In other words, after he had committed the mitzvah or refrained from doing a sin, he still has a desire to sin, he still has a desire to misbehave. However, the godly soul, the godly spark, is overpowering them. A second one is that the godly soul has impacted his internal faculties. His mind and heart are in the right place. In other words, whenever he's facing a challenge, he knows, I need to serve God. I need to do what's right, because his mind says to him, I don't want to anger God. I don't want to be separated from God. Now it's a second level, a much deeper level, where his faculties are willing to do it. However, the animal soul is there fighting. Fighting. There is a challenge, and the godly soul will win because the godly spark is there. The third level is the person is completely changed. He became a righteous man. He has no fight with the animal soul because he kicked it out. He says to the animal soul, you belong in a dumpster, you have no place in me.
But that's almost nobody.
So
That's almost nobody.
the third level is the tzaddik level.
It's a tzaddik level, that's correct.
But nobody's almost.
So you have three levels, maybe Rasha, Benoni, and Tzaddik. A Rasha is someone who is all his evil faculties and desires are there, but the godly soul overpowered, forces it,
Sometimes.
and therefore, after the mitzvah, he has the same desire. The second one is that his internal faculties have changed, his mind and heart, but his desire for sin is still there. His desire for separation is still there. However, the godly soul, the godly spark, forces the body to obey the mind and the heart. That's the second level. So there is an internal conflict still, but the conflict is not as before, because the brains and the heart are on the right track. The third one is there is no challenge. He's doing what's right because God said so. He wants to please God.
The first level should get even more credit because he overcomes the Yitzhara.
The first level,
Yes,
of course.
that should
of course.
be the greatest reward.
Very good. Says the Rebbe. That's the three counting that we read about until now. The first count of the Jewish people is right after they left Egypt. At that time, they didn't want to go out of Egypt, but God forced them. The Egyptians forced the Jewish people out. They didn't want freedom. They didn't want to connect to God. Why? Because their body and soul, their mind and heart were in slavery. How come they came out? God forced them, right? Ki barach ha'am. They had to run away. As the Medrash tells us, you could not take out the Egyptian out of the Jew. You can take the Jew out of Egypt. You couldn't take out the Egypt out of the Jew. They were so defiled, they didn't want to serve God, and they were forced against their will. That's the first level. The second level is just when the Mishkan was erected. I'm sorry, the second level is, says the Rebbe, is
It is.
the second level is,
Golden calf.
no,
No. Second one was when the Mishkan was erected, no?
what?
The second one was.
Oh, a month later, yeah.
When the Mishkan was erected.
The second one just before the building of the Mishkan.
But
That's the
that was the first one when you said that they couldn't get Egypt out of their minds. Still, the Korban Pesach.
No, the Rebbe says before the erection of the sanctuary, and the fulfillment of the command, make a sanctuary for me, was intended to bring about God's promise that I will dwell among them. That is, that God will rest within the Jewish people in such a manner that this would permeate each Jew's inner being. Consequently, beforehand, a second census was necessary. Just before the building of the Mishkan, there was a second census. That was when God says, the census is for bringing me in to dwell among you. That's the second level where the internal inner powers of intellect and emotions are changed to serve God. You create a dwelling, a sanctuary for God in your body. How do you do that? You sanctify your mind and your heart. Now you are a holy person. But that was a temporary, it lasted a very short while. They had a golden calf. Why? Because it came from above, as the rabbi was going to explain soon. God came down, just like the giving of the Torah, came down to them, and milamaila lemata, it's called, from above to below, so it did not affect the humans as much, and therefore it didn't sustain. They ended up in the wrong place. Now comes this week the third portion, the third census, where God says that now the Jewish people have to eradicate all evil and be totally submerged in serving God. The godly spark will take over every part, not only the internal powers, but also the external powers, meaning get rid of the evil.
That's Teshuvah.
That's the Teshuvah, and that is represented by Aaron. Moshe represents God. Moshe is the Shushvin, is the representative of God in this wedding. Aaron is the representing of the bride, which is the Jewish people. So God wants now the third count to be so effective, so impactful, that it will overtake their entire life, not just the internal powers. And therefore, this third time, he says to God turned to Moshe and Aaron together to count, because Aaron will represent the Jewish people. So they're counting, meaning shining off and bringing out the godly spark is such a powerful way that the Jew is connecting to God and they meet halfway. It's called milamata lemala instead of milamayla lemata, from above to below. Now we can explain all the questions. Now we can understand why it's an introduction to the giving of the Torah. Because what happened on the giving of the Torah? God came down on Mount Sinai. But in order for God to come down on Mount Sinai and should have an impact, an effect, there has to be the Jewish people elevating themselves, and therefore God wants to count them. And who is going to be participating in the counting? Aaron, because that's the third time. Now we understand all the time. All the time means that the connection of a Jew to God is at all times, and even when there is opportunity to separate temporarily, they will refuse. In order for that to be corrected or done properly, there were three types of counting, but the third time is the permanent one, and the one that the Jewish people have committed completely, and they will never veer from that, even temporarily. And that can only be done through Aaron, not only Moshe. Even though Moshe brought the Torah, Aaron brings the Jew into the Torah. Now we understand why most of the years when we celebrate Shavuot, the Shabbat before, we read Bamidbar, the first portion of the book of Numbers. And it's called Numbers because the first part of the book is about counting the Jewish people. The counting is because God wants to show that all Jews could possess the godly spark equally the
But this is
same.
the counting before the Torah rather than the counting before the counting.
No, this is on the 1st of Iyar, the year after.
Oh, okay.
But it is read before the giving of the Torah.
But this is the third counting, right?
That's the third counting.
So the third counting you think would have to do with the Teshuvah after the golden calf. Why is it sitting before the giving of the Torah rather than somewhere around the Teshuvah after the golden calf?
Could be it's a Teshuvah after the golden calf.
That's what we were saying.
Except the golden calf,
But that's what we're saying.
The golden calf is before the Mishkan.
the golden calf was much earlier,
Oh, okay, I got the order.
a lot earlier.
Okay, got the order.
This is a year. This is 13 months after they left Mitzrayim. This is the second year. It says right at the beginning.
Okay,
That's the.
that's what that was. Okay, that's
That's the only time I think that shows the exact date and time when
Right.
counting is done.
Be'echad lachodesh hasheni, the first. Oh, and the Rebbe says now we understand why the first of Iyar, not the first of Nisan, because Nisan is all about miracles. It's all about God coming from above to below. That's what Passover. Iyar now is the return. The Jew elevates himself up. That's what.